I was really expecting something in like some little lonely lunchroom with like 4 or 5 people. This is very impressive. Thank you all for coming.
Well, listen, first off, welcome back to the theater and to Broadway. How does it feel this time around?
It's the 5 years since I've done a play, and the difference is extraordinary. My ability to remember lines is completely gone out the window. I remember older actors saying to me, "No, I can't, because I can't remember the lines anymore." And I was like, you know, that's never going to happen to me. But sure enough, it does. It's been a really, really wonderful experience, mostly because it's been so difficult. It's a part that I don't think I'm a natural for, but to be honest, I've felt that about nearly every part I've ever been offered. I don't understand why you want me to do that. So it didn't stop me, but this one was really a challenge for me. But the opportunity to work with Janet McTeer was something that I really wasn't going to let go of. We had a very brief rehearsal period. We were basically mounting a production that had already been done before in London, which is something that normally I'm not really that interested in doing. Again, the chance to work with Janet kind of made me overlook that. And we had 4 weeks, and it's a 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I talk all the time. I'm constantly talking. Last night I was on stage, and I had one of those moments, I don't know, you've probably had them as actors, where you're acting and you're going, wow, I'm still talking. There's some parts that do that to you. Iago's one of them. You're like, whoa, I'm still going. This is really... And I'm one of those nut jobs who reads everything and knows everything and doesn't care. I believe that you've got to take the good with the bad. This was rough in a couple situations, but we just never gave up. And I was telling Richie in the elevator before, it was about a week ago, that I felt like we got it. And I was doing the play. We were in the kind of the middle of the first act, and I went, oh shit, this is it. We're there. This makes sense. This is interesting. This is compelling, and I see how I can play this role now. Unfortunately, that's about a month after opening, but I guess the point is that you never stop working. You never stop working, especially when you're doing 8 shows a week. You'll go nuts, you know. You never stop working, and you just, to have somebody like Janet who's gutsy that way and wants to keep trying things and wants to keep doing things differently, that's a real blessing. To also, you know, someone who brings that level of game in the first place is a remarkable opportunity. But that thing, you know, it would have been horrible to stop where we stopped, where, you know, the director went back to London 4 weeks in, and then we had to do it for the papers and the premiere, and we weren't ready. But it doesn't matter, and to find out that that really doesn't matter, and to deal with one's ego and humility and all of that stuff, and realize that while it's such an intrinsic part of what we do, is not really the important part of what we do. That's a hard lesson and a valuable one.
Yeah, but you actually do it for the audience. Most stars that I've spoken to say, you know, you have to go through that whole early process of the critics and everybody else coming in. But in the end, you really do it for the audience, and every audience is different, right? Absolutely,
absolutely. The problem is it's also a business, you know, so sometimes they invite the audience in before you're ready. You know, because they want to make money, and, you know, they can sell seats off of you, particularly, you know. I mean, I wasn't selling a lot of seats back in the 90s at the public, but after Ray Donovan and a couple movies, you can sell seats to theater shows, expensive seats. And you think about those seats, and they go, should we give you another week to rehearse? How much is $140 a ticket? 600 seats, 8 shows a week? That's a lot of money. I'm gonna give you another week to rehearse. So you go in before you're ready, which is a mistake. But it's also just another part of being an actor, and an interesting part. You can look at it one of two ways. You can go, that's terrible, I hate it, I'm miserable. Or you can go, what do I do in this situation? What have I got to give them tonight? You know, even if I'm still looking for it myself, how do I commit to something that's of value to our experience together as an audience? But you're absolutely right, it's always for the audience.
So what was it a few weeks ago? Was there something specific that really unlocked Valmont?
It wasn't a few weeks ago, it was 3 days ago. You know, as usual, I've never been comfortable with my body. I'm someone who's just not. I love moving. I love dancing. I love fighting. I love using my body. But I've never been comfortable with how my body, with impressions of my body. Like, I don't understand that people see me as big, burly, mean guy. I kind of perceive myself as like a, you know, like an elf or something. You know? So I'm kind of at odds with my own physical image. And then sure enough, Ray Donovan came along. I was like, oh, wow, they really do see me as this bruiser. You know. And the other thing that happens is when you do television, this was one of my anxieties about doing television when I first started, when I first was thinking about taking the Ray Donovan job, and I was right, was once you're in everybody's living room as a character, your ability to leave that character behind is diminished significantly. Now, there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of fame and celebrity there. There's a lot of all the stuff that people generally want from acting there. But for my money, our value to audiences is our anonymity, is the fact that we are the characters we suggest we are. And once we start being the personalities or the characters or the celebrities that they're marketing us as, I think that really diminishes us as actors. And I know that the first 20 minutes of Les Liaisons Dangereuses is generally spent by a good 40% of the audience going, why is Ray in pantaloons? Oh my God, he's talking funny. And that wig doesn't suit him at all. And that's really, I hope he takes his shirt off soon. And that is how, I can feel it the first 40 minutes. I come out and I say my first line and they're all like, and you can go, oh shit, that's terrible. Or you can go, how do I work through this?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was probably carrying, and I think even the director, to a degree, was, to a degree, was playing with Ray's sexuality. And I didn't catch it soon enough. And I was like, hey, no, that's not who's here. That's not who's in the room right now. There's a whole me that pre-exists this thing that needs to get away from this thing for the sake of the audience. And maybe I also am guilty, too, of not figuring out how to do that for this time. I went through a lot this year, so it was a hard time to...
Sure.
It was a hard rehearsal process. But those are always the best ones.
You love the rehearsal process the best, don't you?
Me too. I thought you just said I love it.
Well, I do, too, when I talk to people.
I'm hearing things. This is what happens. You know?
What?
You do 8 shows a week, you can't think straight. It's my favorite part. That's why I like doing plays. I want to rehearse them for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I want to perform them for 1 week. And then that's it. I just like working on plays. I like figuring plays out. And this one, I was in such a panic about all of the lines, so many lines, that was the process. The process was consumed by that. And us kind of trying to get comfortable in this English production that had been done before us. And there just wasn't enough time to move away from that. And I told everybody, look, I don't want to do the same production, but it comes down to it. You got 4 weeks to do a show that big. You just got to do what you can do. 4 weeks, you got to learn the lines and get up and do it. It's just, sorry? What's that? A line from that? Yeah, $130, pal.
Because I thought you were brilliant in this, and I saw it very early on. I saw it 3 days before you opened, and I've seen many productions of this, and I thought you were absolutely brilliant as Valmont.
Well,
it
no,
was your version.
That was a very roundabout way of saying that what it was about 3 or 4 days ago, that the epiphany was allowing my version to come through.
Yeah.
Was allowing what I really felt about the instinct about the character to not just be beneath the surface, but actually be extended out into the audience. And I think that was my problem. I think that I was intention and everything was here, and it needed to be out here. And that's happened in the past 3 or 4 days.
Oh, I can't wait to come back. I'm coming back.
I'm not saying it's happening every night.
I'm sure it is.
It happened once, and that's good enough.
Okay. We started to talk about you are known to millions of fans as Ray Donovan. Ray Donovan fans? Exactly. On to your 5th season, too. How did the show come about for you? And what made you say yes?
The woman who wrote it, Ann Bitterman, I just thought was really brilliant. It's so odd that this sort of, ultra-masculine character actually springs from the mind of a woman, but of course that makes perfect sense to me. I think she was playing out her own fantasies and dreams and wishes of relationships with her father and brother, and they were so vivid to me. Ray's pain, Ray's anger, Ray's loyalty, Ray's violence, Ray's dedication to the idea of what it is to be where I come from, we call it a mensch. Ray's profound love of family and dedication to them was something that really moved me. I just had some kids, and to be honest, Naomi and I were doing a lot of movies at the time, and we were traveling all around the world, and these poor kids were just flying around with us. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a gig that gives us some consistency. Yeah. Naomi at that time had a home in LA, and I thought, this shoots in LA. This will make me be in one place for 6 months. I'll be a grown-up. I'll go to work every day and do the same thing. But it turned out to be an incredible experience for me. And as a guy who primarily thinks of himself as a theater actor, a real kind of workshop on doing film, where every day you would go and you would practice and you would do it over and over again. That idea for me is so important to artists, the idea of repetition, the French word for rehearsal, is that you just do it. You do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you develop a facility with it. And that's really what I appreciate about Ray.
Yeah, because the role of Ray is the perfect melding of artist and material. Did you see that early on when you first got it? This would be a perfect match for you?
No. No, I get nervous when people say that me and Ray are alike. Of course he is, and of course we are to a degree, because every character stems from some place in our own consciousness, but no, I haven't been through the pain that he's been through. I haven't been abused by a priest yet. My father's a pretty decent guy. Yeah. I do have, I think like all men have now in this new culture, there is a real question about sexuality and identity and what masculinity means now, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father. Those are things that are shifting tremendously in our culture. And I think a lot of guys like myself get confused sometimes. And it's important to keep that straight.
As just mentor artistry, when an actor gets that role, You know, that it just, everything you do as Ray is just, you are Ray Donovan. I mean, I don't think we could see anybody else as Ray Donovan if anybody else would cast in this before. You are Ray Donovan.
Thank you. There were a lot of guys they wanted before me.
Wow.
But no, I see them. He would have been much better, I think. There's a couple of guys.
The show is very film noir. Was that intended to be for the very beginning?
Yeah, that was the idea that we were going to do a noir. It was we were hoping to do a noir. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you were brought up on black and white films, weren't you? Growing up?
But I didn't have much to do with that decision. That was Anne. That was Anne, and she always knew that a big influence for her was The Long Goodbye and Chinatown and that whole period and that relationship, particularly between L.A. and noir. Yeah. And pulp was something. And pulp was kind of the thing that I wanted to do more of, to bring more to. That there was, I always liked those pulpy books and comics. Yeah.
Very Philip Marlowe, very Robert Mitchum. I loved that whole time period. I figured Ray is sort of a throwback to that whole thing. What a brilliant cast you get to work with. Yeah. Beautiful ensemble. What's it like working with the cast of Ray Donovan?
It's just, that was something that I had a hand in. Okay. And it was the best to have that kind of power. You know, when you're the titular character on a show, they say, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to get big hitters for every part. And I got Crazy John. And it's been one of the, you know, I love him to death. We'd done a movie earlier, and there was, right away he took to the part. And he just had so much fun doing it, and it's infectious. You watch him, you just know he's having fun, and when an actor's having fun like that, forget it, it's over. Eddie Marsan was a guy that I'd always been a fan of. It's one of those nutty things when you get a little power, and you say, I want to work with that guy. And they were like, he's English. And I was like, I know he's English. And they're like, well, we'd have to fly him here, we'd have to put him up. And I was like, so what? And he's like, can he do a Boston accent? I was like, I don't know. And he went on tape for it, and it was just stunning. It was like, and I knew it. He's such a fucking good actor. So I knew he would do something great. Dash is an old friend. We grew up together in the West Village and East Village. I just knew he was right for Bunchy. I knew he would nail it. And Paula, Paula was the only one that they fought me on. And Paula, they wanted these, like, really, they brought me a lot of models, you know? They brought me a lot of really attractive women. And it just didn't click until I met Paula. And I mean, I knew Paula because we had done Hamlet together. Yeah. But Paula had the grit. She had, I believe that she was Irish Roman Catholic from Boston. She swears like a sailor in real life, you know? And she does it, you know, like, she maybe gets, 5 or 6 fucks an episode. She adds at least 20. And she just, that felt like, I felt like those two were partners. It felt like those two had time together. It felt like when I met her and I started to act with her a little as Ray, it felt like we'd been together all our lives. Yeah. And it was uncomfortable, and it was risky, it was volatile, and it didn't always go well. Right away, I knew all of that just from meeting her, and that was like, okay, we got to do this. And they were also, in their defense, they had some great actresses too, but for me, I just wanted Paula so bad. And that was Pooch, amazing, thank God the game shut down because we got Pooch. Pooch is like the most incredible, positive, talented, remarkable person. I cast him as Muhammad Ali in The Bleeder too, and he was amazing. Karis is a remarkable young actress who plays my daughter, so, yeah.
Brilliant cast, really brilliant cast.
Unfortunately, then you got to do it, because when they're that good, the show keeps running. It's like, I don't know.
You have long work days. How long does it take to shoot an episode?
They average between 10 and 12 days.
Okay. But you have long shooting days, like
Yeah,
18 hours?
you know, I don't talk a lot on that show, but I'm there a lot, you know. So it's like a 16-hour day. You're just sort of standing around, sturming and drawing, you know.
Do you rehearse a lot before going into it, or no?
We do. Unfortunately, in television, because you have to move so quickly, it's really difficult. But this particular group of actors likes to feel comfortable with what they're doing. You don't have anyone in this, unfortunately, sometimes, we don't have anybody in this group that doesn't swing for the fences every time.
Yeah.
And so if we're not happy with it, we work it, much to the dismay of the network and the producers. But I think ultimately the final product has a very cinematic feel to it, and the acting feels seamless, and at least what I like is unnoticeable.
Yeah.
Narrative takes over, and characters are just character.
Beautiful.
You know?
When do you start back to start shooting the 5th season?
In February.
So you literally get done with Les Liaisons, have a little break, and you go right back on the set again.
That is correct, Richard.
I didn't mean to remind you. I want to go back to the beginning. Growing up, where did your love for performing begin, and what were your earliest creative outlets?
I had a teacher at Brooklyn Tech an English teacher who entered me in a poetry contest. I don't know what he read that I wrote. I think it was some like Constance Erdang poem that I plagiarized, or pretty closely plagiarized. But he liked it, and he thought I could write, and he said I should enter this poetry contest, and I entered it, and I won, and I thought, oh, winning is cool. So maybe I'm good at this, because no one else seems to be into this. I was like the only person, so I was like, my theory was always big fish, small pond. Find the small ponds. I played the bass clarinet. I played the bass clarinet in a band that played the Mendelssohn Wedding March for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I remember being in the orchestra pit watching the actors do the Shakespeare and just being like, they're terrible. I'm looking at the other musicians like a quintet, a woodwind quintet, and I'm just looking, they're fucking awful. You know? I mean, that is so cheesy. And they were all, they didn't care. They're musicians, they're like, But I couldn't stop talking during the whole show. I was like, this is really, I mean, look at that. It's really, oh, come on. And there's not a peep. They're not getting laughs. They're not, it's dead. And that was like, I was like, okay, then maybe I want to do that more than I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then I did my first Shakespeare play, and I loved it.
Because did you co-star with Jeffrey Donovan in The Merchant of Venice at school, at college?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it University of Massachusetts? Where were you?
It was at UMass. Yeah.
Okay. Is that where your acting began?
No, my acting began at Friends Seminary.
Okay.
I played Nick Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. I was after that play once I saw those mooks. I was like, I'm gonna get that. That's the play I want to do.
So that's where your love for Shakespeare began?
Well, my mom
Yeah.
encouraged me to read it. My mom really encouraged me to read a lot. I was really into reading. And I liked classical things. I liked old things. I liked strange things. And I played the bass clarinet, for crying out loud. You know?
Well, talk about the influence that George C. Wolfe and the public theater has had on your career and what those experiences have meant to you.
I owe George everything, you know.
Yeah.
I got out of Yale, and he just said, this place could be your home if you want it, you know. And I hadn't done anything. I'd done nothing. He didn't know I was any good. He didn't know anything about me. I auditioned for his Tempest, and I played a tiny role in it. I played Sebastian, and he just said, he just made me feel at home always. And I always felt at home at that theater. And he just kept giving me parts. And it just grew from there. And it was like, that, I enjoyed it, you know? That was what a great place to be. And it's hard because there are not a lot of actors who want to commit to $500 a week at the public. And again, it was small pond, big fish. And I just said, yeah, I want to do this. And I kept turning movie things down, and I kept, not a lot of movie things, but, you know, things that I could say no to, I would say no to, and I kept doing plays. And George just kept giving me better and better parts, and I got to go through all these parts that most actors only dream about playing, and I was able to play them.
Everybody who I've spoken to who's worked at the public said it's the most freeing home, that you just get to do your work.
Yeah. It was, you know, I was also George was a remarkable guy. You know, he was a really wonderful guy. And then there was an environment in the theater back then that was very, it's still there, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to say, but George was special to me. And he really meant a lot to me as a young actor. But just, there was a ferocity that he had in his approach to it, and there was a freewheeling kind of openness to it all, and every aspect of it, and you just felt like anything was possible.
Yeah, because you got to do some at the Public Theater and some at the Delacorte in the park, and I think one of the first things you saw was Raul Julia in something in the park.
Yeah.
What did you see him in there? Do you remember what
I
it
saw
was?
him in Othello.
Yeah.
And I remember that Desdemona's death scene, a crane flew up from behind the castle, and I was like, whoa. Outdoor Shakespeare, okay, this is good.
What were your experiences like doing Shakespeare in the Park?
Athletic.
Yeah.
Wet.
Yeah.
Just jazz, just always, it was exciting. It was so physical that acting was that physical. I really liked it. I really liked when acting got physical.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I loved about Shakespeare. It was so physical. Of course, it's mental as well, and of course, you're working dialogue at an incredible pace. But that act of cognition that it takes to break down that text and make it coherent is in itself physical.
Yeah.
And that space and the size, and it's very physical, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, you started your career on stage, and you always return home to it. So let's talk about some of your stage highlights, and just tell me what comes to mind, a fun story or a memory or something. You did 2 Harold Pinter plays, Moonlight, which you did at Roundabout with Jason Robards and Blythe Danner. And then you did Betrayal with Juliette Binoche. Favorite memories of doing those?
Jason.
Yeah.
Jason was just, you know, amazing. I was working on stage with Jason Robards. It was amazing. And Carol Rice became a dear friend of mine, the director. Just every one of those, every gig was like a learning experience. An incredible, the mentors I had, the teachers that I had, were just, who learns from Jason Robards and Carol Rice?
Yeah.
And Jason was just the funniest guy. He would write his lines on things. Like, no, this was like a guy in his 70s, you know, who was doing 2 shows at once, simultaneously in rep. He was doing Moonlight, which, by the way, he had all the lines. And then he's doing Molly Sweeney or something like that in rep, simultaneously on the weekends. And I just didn't know how he did it. And then every once in a while, he'd be playing a scene with you, and he just kind of, there would be like, pick up a picture of his wife. So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. I've never gone up in my life in front of a paying audience, ever, until this last play. Second preview, they had a girl in the wings who was going to be on book because I was having so much trouble with the lines. And I said, give me a radio mic. I said, I'm not giving you a radio mic. I said, I want a radio mic. No, you can't have a radio mic. So I'm trying to do the play. Ripped untimely from the womb. And Jane Gray, who's a really, really good friend of mine, who did talk radio, stage manager, she tells the girl who's doing the thing, she said, Liev is one of the proudest guys. He's never gonna call for a line. He's never, ever, ever gonna call for a line. So this girl's back there like, About 30 minutes into the show, I hope none of you were there. About 30 minutes into the show, I'm like, oh, dead spot. I look over at Janet, because sometimes Janet can pull me out of them, and she's like, And I'm like, you know, without saying anything, I'm like, no, really, dead spot. And she's like, And I just sat there for what felt like an hour and a half, and it was probably 30 seconds or so. No, it was probably 15 seconds. And then I went, line. And apparently that wasn't loud enough. And that's like the most humiliating, crushing moment of my career, because I've never done that, and I would never do that.
Yeah.
I like breaking the fourth wall. That's important. I love to break the fourth wall, but never by saying line. And then I realized it's not loud enough, so the second time I'm like, lie. And she, and so if I shouldn't hear that again, I'm like, line! And I hear panic and rustling, and she says something completely inaudible. And so I make up a line from Act 2 and say it, which inspires something that Janet picks up, gets, and puts us back on track, and we go. But that's my response to not knowing my lines, and I'm nowhere near 70. Jason Robards does this.
So do we see that in your near future?
I wish that I'd remembered that.
Totally. That's wild. You won the Tony Award for your brilliant performance as Ricky Roma in David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross. Perfect ensemble. What did you enjoy the most about doing that play and tackling Mamet?
The musicality and the playfulness between that company that was very buoyant. We were all batting around. We were moving. It was very light. It was very comedic. There was a lot of dexterity, and nothing was precious. And there was just incredible sense of ensemble. And the thing would ping around the room, and you felt it. You just knew when actors don't drop the ball, that's what happens. And it's like everybody knew each other's timing, and everybody was sensitive to it, and nobody was grandstanding. And so the thing flew around the room, and I got all the credit because I had the big part. Yeah. But it was just so much fun. And Joe Mantello, who's an extraordinary director, who on opening night gave me a wooden box of steak knives, and his card just said, kill them all. And that was it. That was right. That was Ricky Roma. Just kill them all. Fuck them. You know.
I love the look of everybody. I mean, Alan Alda, you can recognize him.
Yeah.
You know, do you remember the first time you saw him?
No, with the hair and the suit that didn't fit, and me with that I had to walk around with that mustache for like 3 months. It was horrible.
Did doing Shakespeare make it easier for you to understand the rhythms of Mamet?
Of course. Yeah, I think doing Shakespeare made Mamet understand the rhythms of Mamet. And I think Pinter too.
Yeah.
And Beckett.
Because a lot of actors I talk to say they always stumble with Mamet, like during the rehearsal process. But Shakespearean actors who I've talked to said, oh, they understand the rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
And I think you gotta, for my money, when I watch actors do these musical plays, I call them, the language plays, is a little too much thinking sometimes going on, like about how to do it. Don't worry about how to do it, just do it, you know? Don't think too much about the silences and the pauses and the things. Just let it flow, and it happens. And that's sort of the truth with Shakespeare. It's just parsing it, you know? Once you understand what you're saying, it all becomes really clear.
Yeah.
You know? So start with the lucid plays, start with the easy plays. Like Hamlet's a very easy play.
Is it really?
I think so. It's a very clear play. That's why people love it so much. The other plays are like, what? Like, I didn't understand that. But Hamlet, you know what he's to be or not to be. That's the question. How hard is that? You know what I mean? And then once you get a sense of that language, once your brain opens up and adapts to the range of that vocabulary and meter,
Yeah.
then it gets easier to understand the other plays. But pick the easy ones first. Scottish play's a good one, too.
I never thought that before. That's interesting. They're very clear.
They're very clear. They're very lucid plays.
Yeah.
And then you can get more dense. Once you figure out how he uses alliteration, how he uses antithesis, how he uses imagery, then it becomes clear and you see things repeated so that you can understand them. And also the vocabulary, you start to develop the muscularity for that vocabulary.
Sure. Talk Radio by Eric Bogosian, where you played abrasive radio talk show host Barry Champlain. The New York Times called you the finest American theater actor of your generation. Totally agree. Favorite memories of that experience in working with director Robert Falls?
Getting to meet Eric Bogosian, who I was a huge fan of. I wrote my senior thesis on Brecht and Shakespeare, and the idea of Brecht's concept about acting was that in any given moment, an actor is responsible for these three elements. One is to play the part they've been contracted to play. These things have to be present constantly when you're working. To play the part that you've been contracted to play. Two, to be an actor who has been contracted to play a part. And three, to be a member of a socio-political society who happens to be an actor who happens to be playing this part. And what I liked about that was that everything, particularly with Shakespeare, everything was important. Like in soliloquy, I could look into the audience and they knew that they were looking at an actor. But my perspective as the character and as the actor and as the socio-political person was that, does that lessen in any way the value or the inherent truth of what I'm saying? Just because you know I'm not who I'm saying I am, does that make it any less important? And there was something about that that really makes people go, whew, this is scary, this is real, this is powerful. And there's something that it does to the actor that it empowers them where they think, this is not fake, there's nothing fake. And then when theater starts to spill out over the stage, or in the case of film, through the screen, it really becomes exciting. And I think that that's what Brecht was on about. And that we do things that are substantive and have meaning to us so that they have meaning to others. And talk radio, why it was so important to me was I grew up watching performance artists and people like Eric Bogosian who would go to clubs. I remember at Danceteria once, he had this Ricky, this lounge lizard act, and literally all he was trying to do was get the people in the audience to throw bottles at him. This was like the punk rock of theater, and I didn't think there could be a punk rock in theater, but I'd read about Artaud and all of that stuff, but here was a guy who was actually doing it. He was out on stage, and you know, he was messed up at that point in his life, but he was out there on stage making fun of these bridge and tunnel people who had come to Danceteria, trying to get them, and you know, he's bridge and tunnel, but he's trying to get them pissed off at him so that they'll do something, so it'll start a fight, it'll start a reaction, something incendiary. And I just thought that was such a provocative and interesting kind of theater, and that had some place in broader application to the work that we all do outside of places like Danceteria. There was a way of applying that to Shakespeare, that there's something rebellious, there's something provocative about talking to someone and looking them in the eye and not being afraid to acknowledge the truth of what is in the play. And he was a big inspiration to me. And then he did a play at Lincoln Center, and I went and auditioned for it, Suburbia, and he couldn't have been less interested in me. And I was like, I wrote my senior thesis on you. He's like, yeah, next. And I was devastated.
Yeah.
And then they called me to do talk radio, and I was like, I'm doing Bogosian.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal for me. It was a huge...
Big challenge to play that role 8 times a week?
My God. And I smoked like a half a pack of cigarettes every night. I think that's like the big scene at the end where he just sort of breaks down. That's like from like a nicotine, you know, overdose. But what a great, you know, the other trick about that production that nobody really knows is that I was playing into a microphone. So I could do all sorts of things with my voice that I couldn't normally do on a stage. I could get emotion to carry. I could break things down. I could do breathing stuff that you can't normally do on the stage. So it was a great, and as a guy who's done a lot of VO work and played around with a lot of microphones, it was really fun. And of course I looked at it like I was cheating, because it was to me. You could do all sorts of emotional stuff when you're amplified, so subtly amplified that you can't do on a stage, you know?
Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge, your remarkable performance as Eddie Carbone, for director Gregory Mosher. How challenging was he to play? Talk about breakdowns.
That was another one. I was like, I'm not right for this part. You know?
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I keep doing plays with guys that breaking down and getting killed in the end? There's a lot of that in my life. I don't know why. I didn't know how good Miller was. I really didn't. And that's what that play was for me. I never really cared for naturalism.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, as a young actor, I kind of thought it was boring. I was terrible at Chekhov, terrible. Like at Yale, everybody was like, Chekhov, and I was like, this sucks, I can't do it. And I just thought it was so bad. I had no in. I didn't really care much for the method. I didn't really care much for my own experience. I didn't like it. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't exciting enough to me. It wasn't colorful enough. It didn't have any va-va-voom to it. It was like, look at me, I'm interesting. No, you're not. You know, that was my attitude towards it. And I just didn't, it took me that play to learn what he was really on about, that incredible passion that he had as a writer and as a human being. Look, I really had underestimated, and I want to go back and look at Chekhov, but I still can't do it. And that, for me, was an inroad into a certain kind of acting that I had to figure out my own way to, because I was never very good at it. In school, I just wanted to be bigger all the time. And I think that probably put me on the runway to Ray Donovan.
Interesting. Beautiful performance.
Thank you.
You have also created so many indelible, complex characters on film and work with some of the finest directors. And when I went through your list, I mean, we just have a small group here. Let's talk about some of them. Your first film was Mixed Nuts, which is for director Nora Ephron, where you played the transvestite Chris. Was it daunting being on a film set? I always ask stage actors like that first time with Steve Martin, and what happened that first day of rehearsal?
You know what happened that first day of rehearsal.
But they don't know what happened, if you want to.
It was daunting, yes. I had just gotten out of school. I was making like $350, maybe $500 a week doing Down at the Public. Nora Ephron, who's an amazing person who I love deeply, changed my life, saw me in some terrible little play. She saw me she just looked at my body and she thought it would be funny to see me as a woman. And, or to wax me, she thought would be funny. And it was hilarious. The day that I got waxed was hilarious for her. It was incredible, like the spread. You know, first of all, I paid off my student loans with that one movie. Boom. And I had like 70 grand in student loans. That was remarkable to me, that you could make so much money acting. I was like, whoa. I stumbled into something, you know. And then the spread, like, because it was Nora, like the smoked fish and H&H bagels and like every kind of cookie and cake and a smoothie bar and a juice bar. And that was just like walking into the room. And then in the room was Madeline Kahn, who I was obsessed with since I was, I mean, I used to have so many wet dreams about Madeline Kahn. And Steve Martin and Juliette Lewis and Adam Sandler and all this, that was like Anthony LaPaglia, who I kind of knew. So I was like, we're on a sort of similar level, but you're better than me and more famous, but we're close at least. And Jon Stewart before he was, you know.
Jon Stewart.
And it was an amazing thing. And I was just like in awe. And the story that you're referring to is the first day, Graciela Danielle was choreographing the dancing, and I had to dance with Steve Martin. She said, well, let's go upstairs and do the rehearsal and the dance and work on the foxtrot a little bit. And I was like, oh, yeah, I wasn't ready to do any dance rehearsing today. And she said, you have your shoes, right? And I was like, yeah, well, they have my shoes, but I didn't know that we were gonna dance because I had worn boxer shorts. And if you were gonna dance, you, the foxtrot works like the man puts his leg between the woman's leg and leads her around like that. And now I'm the woman because I'm a transvestite. And Steve Martin is sticking his leg between my legs. And she said, we have sweatpants for you. And I said, I can't have sweatpants. I got boxers on and sweatpants. And so I put the boxers on with the sweatpants. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna. I was so nervous because I'm Steve Martin. I'm also is like a god to me, and I'm not. And we don't even get to meet, and we're just dancing all of a sudden, and he comes up to here on me with the 6-inch heels, and I like got Steve Martin's head here, and I'm just like trying not to pay attention to him as I walk around, and just one time his thigh just brushes my, my privates, and I thought to myself, wouldn't this be like the most inappropriate thing in the world if I got an erection right now? And that was all it took. For me to get what was probably the best erection I've ever had in my entire life. Unrelenting, angry one. I went through baseball teams. Yeah. I literally started to cry. I was like tearing, like out of the side of my eyes. Partially because I thought it was so funny, and partially because I knew I was going to get fired. And every time we would spin, around to the left, it would hit him in the leg. And that was my first movie job, and I thought, so much for your student loans, you're done.
At least they're paid off.
He never said a word about it. Never said a word.
No, because most actors who start on stage always tell me that their first time on a set was like, oh my God, daunting and scary, and all these things happened to you on that first film.
I was terribly nervous. I didn't understand what was going on at all. And they were like, do it again. I was like, what? Do it again. You can just do it again? Yeah, oh, do it again. Okay, and then like, do it again. Then I started to like it.
Yeah.
Like, I can do it 8 times. I can do it 8 different ways. Yeah. That's fantastic.
The Day Trippers is one of my favorite movies for writer-director Greg Mottola, who's a dear friend of yours now, right? I mean, what did you learn from doing those early films?
And that was for me, there was a really special time in New York. Independent film was kind of taking off in a way that was really exciting. Low-budget film was really interesting, and a lot of good stuff was happening. And I think there's something about when the entire budget for the film is $50,000, you come together in a way that people don't come together on big budget movies where they're like, why is my trailer so small? When you're thinking, how do we get the shot without getting kicked off the street, everybody kind of rallies in a way that creates an ensemble feeling that makes the films good. And Day Trippers was that experience for me. But, remarkable group of actors. We have to remember that in that movie that cost $50,000, you had Stanley Tucci, Hope Davis, Parker Posey, Campbell Scott, Ann Mira. And so everyone was just so impressed by Greg and his neuroses.
Yeah. Well, you made 2 films for director Edward Zwick. You did Defiance, opposite Daniel Craig and Jamie Bell, another one of my favorite movies, and Pawn Sacrifice. Favorite memories of working with him and working on those films?
We just got along. I don't know. I was very grateful to him for casting me in Defiance, first of all.
Yeah.
I was very, as someone who perceives himself as at least half Jewish, I was very proud to play someone who fought back. The story of the Holocaust, as I had heard it, was that we had gone like lambs to the slaughter. And so I was very moved by a version of the story that said, that's actually not the case. There's a whole bunch of people who did some incredible things. And the Bielski Otriad was a story was their story. These guys were thugs, you know. They were thugs before the Nazis came. So when the Nazis came and started speaking in the language of violence, they were the only ones who understood. They were like, oh, okay, you want to do it that way. So they went to the woods and they started guerrilla warfare tactics, and they started killing people and using fear tactics. You know, they decapitate Gestapo soldiers and put their heads in the plots. They did horrible things, but that's what you had to do. And they instilled fear in the hearts of these monsters.
Yeah.
And I was really both drawn to the contradictions in that story about what violence is and why violence is, but also to the identity of Jewish culture and who we are and what we are. It meant a lot to me to be a part of saying that this is part of our history as well.
You were also wonderful in that movie. I mean, Daniel Craig, Jamie Bell, I mean, all of you together, just beautiful. The Butler for director Lee Daniels, where you played Lyndon B. Johnson. What's it like preparing and playing such a historic figure?
It was great. That ended up being a whole lot of prosthetic makeup, which I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do that again. It was like a lot of prosthetic makeup. I was in there, and we were shooting that in New Orleans, and it's so hot there already. And then these like guys putting like 4 or 5 layers of rubber on me. And I loved Lee. He's such a character, and he's so much fun. I'd work with him anytime, anywhere. And that's why I said yes to that. But it was just so hot and so, you know, trying to act through prosthetics. It's like mask work. So you gotta really have the time with the prosthetics, and you gotta work with it. You gotta stay in front of a mirror, and you gotta really spend a lot of time doing it. And I didn't have enough time, but I love doing it. And I, except for the heat and the melty face problem. But it was great. I mean, and the people, I mean, it was, you know, I got to hang out with Lenny Kravitz and all those. It was great.
It's interesting that you say it was like acting through a mask. That's quite fascinating, because we don't see it as an audience watching the film, but you're so used to using your face, well, that you must feel something's on there.
That's the great thing about training, is like, that's where I was like, when am I gonna ever use that mask class that I had in 1980? Sure enough, they slap a Lyndon Johnson thing on your face, and you're like, how's this work?
I love it.
And it did, and it helped.
Another film of yours is Taking Woodstock, for director Ang Lee, where you played Vilma, a cross-dressing ex-Marine. You played her with so much humanity and heart. What did that role and working with Ang Lee mean to you?
I think Vilma, for me, was sort of the Zush Bielski of the gay community, that she represented an underrepresented aspect of this community that doing the research on was really fascinating, that there were these people in the gay community, particularly during Stonewall, who could fight and would kick your ass badly, and they protected their community, and I just thought that was really powerful. And all, you know, it was really, I just wanted to work with Ang. But Ang liked that aspect of her as well. And Ang said, I didn't think I was gonna get the job, but I'm in an interview with Ang Lee, and I'm like talking, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking because you're just trying to keep talking. You're in front of the director, just talk. And I'm talking. And at one point, he's like, and I'm talking. And all of a sudden, I stop talking, and he goes, you have nice legs. And I don't have nice legs. And I was trying to figure out, what is this? And then he sent me the script for Taking Woodstock. And I was like, okay, it's legs. But it was, Ang is one, such a privilege to work for him. He's one of my favorite people to work for. He's incredibly demanding, which is what I like. I like that style in a director. I like when they know what they want, and they're aggressive about it, and there's no bullshit. And everybody needs to understand that this is once in a lifetime what we're doing. And if you're not doing your best, if you're not doing everything you can to really come up with something remarkable in this moment, then you shouldn't be here. Yeah. It's not about that. Everything with Ang is about the best. He's always focused on, I just love that energy, and I thrive off people who Janet's like that.
Yeah.
Here, she has that same ferocity for it. Like, it's just gotta just give everything all the time. And Ang, watching him do that, and his facility and his ability are also really wonderful.
You've had a brush with pop culture a few times in your career. You were known to legions of fans for playing Cotton Weary in the Scream trilogy, for one of the greatest horror directors, the late Wes Craven. What impact did that film have on your life and career? And then also playing Sabretooth opposite your friend Hugh Jackman in X-Men Origins Wolverine. What were those experiences like for you?
Scream was a big deal. You know, Bob Weinstein, I don't remember what I had done, but he called me into his office and he said, I want you to, all you gotta do is walk up the stairs. I'll give you 20 grand. You just gotta walk up the stairs. I'm like, just walk up the stairs and this thing I got, just do it for me. I was like, okay. And that was Scream 1.
Yeah.
And that took off. It was huge. And I was in. I could now do Scream 2 and Scream 3. And that was a big part of people being aware of me in Hollywood and being in the successful franchise, because that's a lot of what determines your higher ability as a film actor, and that to have something that made that much money and to have been a part of it was a very good thing for me. I think the X-Men movie was a huge leap for me in that I got to meet Hugh, who I really like, and Hugh taught me a lot. I didn't, you know, I never, I used to be, what's the word? Attractive actors bothered me. And people who spent too much time on their appearance bothered me. And people who worked out too much bothered me. People who made it about how they looked in general always bothered me. But that was a very adolescent notion and a defensive one, kind of sophomoric one, that I was afraid, perhaps at some level, that I was less than and that my abilities lay somewhere else. And so I was dismissive of that. And then I met Hugh Jackman, who was one of those actors who just bothered me. And, but I didn't bother him, and he liked me, and he'd see me in the theater, and he invited me to do this movie with him. And I said, yeah, okay, because I'd seen him in the theater too, so I knew what his range was. People who just seen him in the movies don't know his range. He's got range. And he invited me to do this, and I said, I respect this guy, I like this guy, I'm gonna do this. And then he said, so, you know, like in his Australian, he was like, so, mate, you gonna come down to the gym with me? I'm like, I'm not going to the gym. You know, I don't go to the gym. Don't they got a suit or something I could put on? Like, like CGI, don't they do that with cameras and shit? And he's like, no, mate, this is how we do it. I'm like, ugh. And I started, he taught me how to train. He taught me how to lift weights. He taught me how to change my body. Yeah. And what he really made me realize, aside from the obvious commercial aspects of our industry, which I'd rather not talk about, because that's the stuff that I do think I was kind of right on in the beginning. But what he did make me realize is that there's this tool in my kit that I wasn't using, which was my body. And my body just responds emotionally, so I always thought they were one and the same. Like, I didn't need to change my body, it just, my body is a responsive instrument. But I could actually change it. I could eat an army of chickens and lift a lot of weights, and I could look like a bodybuilder. And when I saw that, at the end of 2 months, I was like, holy shit, that's a whole different thing, you know? I'm somebody else now. Yeah. And I think probably Ray Donovan probably came out of that period of my life where it was like, people started to see me as this big bruiser. But that was only because I was lifting weights, you know? It was like, and then I started to think about other applications for that when you wanted to get bigger or smaller, and the value of it, and the value of work.
Yeah.
The work ethic, that Q's work ethic is really unparalleled.
Time is flying by really fast, but I have a question from someone in the house today. You made your feature film directorial debut with Everything is Illuminated, which you also adapted from, is it Jonathan
Safran Foer.
Foer's best-selling novel. How did that project come about for you, and what was it like directing for the first time?
I realized the value of actors, you know, because I had this idea that, you know, Lou DiBello, who was, not Lou DiBello, Lou DiGiamo, who was Scorsese's casting director, wonderful casting director. He had this beautiful thing that he did where he would cast guys from the neighborhood in all the parts. And I really thought that that was really compelling on film, because there was a kind of naturalism in film that was very intriguing to me. And so I wanted to cast all these Ukrainian characters, non-actors, Ukrainians, guys who worked in construction sites, and you could see it in their eyes and their skin, and it was hard, because they didn't have the shorthand that actors have. And I learned a real respect for actors. But I found one remarkable non-actor named Eugene Hutz, who plays the lead, who is the lead singer of a punk gypsy band called Gogol Bordello, which I love.
Yeah.
And he was just a phenomenon, and he really made the movie what it is.
Yeah. Edwin has a question. I have been told that for auditions, directors like to see you make big choices, go big or go home. Would you agree with that?
I don't think so. I don't know. That's hard. No, I don't agree. I think they're looking a lot of time for how you're going to feel on camera. They're looking a lot at how you're going to feel with another actor. They're comparing, and they're looking for a lot of different things. And if you go big, you might just knock yourself out of the box. I think go confident and go, you know, one of my, I have to say, I really loved auditioning. Like, I was a really good auditioner. And really, the reason I was such a good auditioner is because I never thought I was going to get a job. I was working the audition. Like, I was like, this is my opportunity to work. I'm going to show you what I got. Because I'm not going to get the job. We both know that. So I'm just going to show you what you're missing. That worked really well for me. It worked really well, except with Brian De Palma.
Really?
Yeah.
Did he want big or?
I couldn't get him to look up.
Wow.
All auditions, like, but that's how it is. You know, those guys, they come in from Hollywood, they're all jet lagged. They got to look at 18 people who they've never heard of in their lives. That's favors to agents that they got to look at you. I just gotten out of school, and I was like, what I'm doing is pretty good. Look up.
So you just do your very best in the room when something like that happens?
You know what it is? It's for me, there's always some emotion that I connect to performing.
Yeah.
Like, for me, like, it's the excitement of doing it. It's the excitement of, I've got an audition that is an event for me, and that gives me an energy that makes the work good. So it's just finding the way to get yourself to the place you need to be. And there's nothing on the line for me, because I was never going to get the job. It was just, I was going to get to act. I wasn't playing the bass clarinet anymore, you know?
Hey, one more. Jerry O'Donnell says, when you have an emotional scene, such as the opening up to the priest in Ray Donovan, the moment just before you shoot, do you think about the actual moment before in the scene, or are you searching for the emotion with each take, afraid and alone?
It's a good question. I don't think about it too much. I try not to. I try really hard to listen, and yet listen on a subsonic level. Like, you're just completely available in scenes like that. You just have to be so available to what's coming at you. Generally, what's coming at you from somebody else is better, but also what's happening to you. What are the physiological phenomena that are occurring in your body at any given moment, and which of those can you grab and exaggerate? I got sweaty palms right now. Where am I going to go with sweaty palms? It's going to take me somewhere. It's going to take me to some tension in my hand, which is going to take me to some tension in the back of my neck, which is going to take. So you're listening to that stuff as well as you're listening to the text, and then you're breathing with your listening, and that's because most of you know that's where the crying comes from. It comes from what disrupts your natural process of breathing, where your heart kind of intercepts your lungs and goes, "You're fucked," and that's what crying is, you know. So, but you have to really listen. And I guess, you know, that's the same thing with the method. That's the same thing. It's a different way of doing the same thing. But my technique, as best as I can describe it, is about that, listening to impulse and intuition and surprising yourself with what you find. The hard part is when you know what you have to do, as everybody here knows. When you know you have to reach an emotional place, can't do it. But if you're listening to what's happening, you can get surprised, and it's the surprise that allows you access to the emotion. I think, most of the time. Not always.
We have just a few more minutes. I'd love for you to talk about your new film, The Bleeder.
Oh. Yeah.
You star,
Yeah.
co-wrote, and produced.
Yep. Thank you.
Fascinating story. Yes, listen. Those are what you did for that.
No, it's a terrific story. Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder, he was a 40-to-1 underdog against Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad was just coming off of the fight in Zaire with George Foreman, which is probably, if you're a boxing fan, one of the most remarkable bouts that ever occurred in the history of boxing. The way Ali was a terrible, terrible underdog in that fight, he figured out how to beat Foreman. No one was supposed to ever beat Foreman. It's what made Ali the greatest that ever lived. Off of that fight, he comes to America and he wants a little break. He's like, find me, and Don King's like, oh, we're gonna make some money. We're gonna do a black-white thing. Problem is, there's no great white fighters around at that time, so they get this guy, Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder, who's most famous for bleeding. And he's a 40-to-1 underdog against Muhammad Ali. And he's a strong man for the mob sometimes. And he's a liquor salesman. And the problem is no one told Chuck that it wasn't a real fight. And Chuck trained his ass off and happily went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali. So thrilled and excited. When you meet Chuck, he's just the loveliest guy. And I understand what got him through those 15 rounds. Because when you look at Rocky and that story, the whole thing is like, I did it, I made it, oh, I can handle the pain. Chuck wasn't like that. Chuck was like, holy shit, I'm in the ring with Muhammad Ali. And he said, and he told me, he said, Liev, I think I loved it. He would punch me in the face, and I loved it. Every time he hit me in the face, I was like, I'm getting punched in the face by Muhammad Ali. It was like, and that was what kept him on his feet. He was just, you know, he was fighting with the greatest. And that spirit was infectious, and I really liked him as a character. The other thing that was really interesting about his story is that Chuck took a beating because of fame.
Yeah.
It did something to his life that really messed him up, and he really had to pay quite dearly for. And that was something that, when I read that script, I was interested in, because I got a little neurotic about that myself. And what fame does to a normal person is a pretty interesting concept. And so that's sort of what we went after with this story. And it turns out that, you know, Sylvester Stallone was in the audience, he saw the fight, and he wrote Rocky. And Chuck was kind of living his life in parallel to this character that doesn't exist, and competing with him all the time and losing. And that was a story that meant a lot to me, and it probably will mean a lot to many actors.
Yeah. I think it opens in February, doesn't it?
I think, yeah. IFC has it, February and March.
Cannot wait. 2 very quick questions. These are my finals. What are you the proudest of in your life?
2 boys, Sasha and Kai.
What is the best bit of advice that you've been given, both personally and professionally, that you live your life by?
Try to be nice.
Yeah. I thank you. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I thank you for one of the most beautiful afternoons. Thank you very much. Liev Schreiber.
Yeah.